Welcome to our History channel.
Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into what I honestly think is one of history's greatest ironic twists: how independent India ingeniously inherited massive colonial infrastructure and totally transformed its fundamental purpose. Imagine a country ruled by a foreign power for nearly 2 centuries, a place where wealth was extracted, where the entire economy was essentially rewired for colonial interests, and where the people had to fight for generations just to regain their freedom. That country, of course, is India. But out of that incredibly difficult history comes this absolutely fascinating story of transformation. So today, we're going to look at the remnants of that era and see exactly how they were completely reinvented. But before we get into what India kept, we've got to ask a pretty crucial question about the original intent behind all these massive creations. Because let's be real, the answer is definitely not simple generosity. The colonial government didn't build these extensive systems as like gifts to the local population. No, in almost every single case, these systems were meticulously designed to serve colonial administration, to move the military around, to speed up communication, and ultimately to serve British economic interests. So keep that original purpose in the back of your mind as we look at what happened next. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The colonial contradiction, 2. Repurposing physical infrastructure, 3. Transforming culture and language, 4. Reclaiming instruments of power, 5. The true cost of empire, and finally, 6. A legacy reborn. Let's just jump right into Section 1, the colonial contradiction, intent versus outcome. This is basically the fundamental paradox of the entire British period in India. The British East India Company originally showed up mostly for trade, right? And then they established these massive systems specifically for wealth extraction and moving military troops around to maintain control. But the real contradiction, the twist, lies in the democratic outcome. That exact same infrastructure was eventually utilized for uniting a vast nation, boosting domestic tourism, and driving independent global commerce. It's a remarkable flip in purpose. Moving on to Section 2, repurposing physical infrastructure, specifically looking at railways and hill stations. Just think about the sheer scale of this shift when it comes to the Indian railways. What started back in 1853 as a tiny passenger run between Bombay and Thane, actually it was just a 21-mile trip, rapidly exploded in the late 19th century. Why? Well, to move troops quickly to crush rebellions and to transport raw materials like cotton straight from the interior to the ports for export. But today, that colonial web is literally the lifeblood of a modern nation. It carries over 20 million daily passengers, so a system built strictly for extraction turned into a system of ultimate connection. And it's a super similar story with mountain infrastructure. The British developed places like Shimla, Mussoorie, and Lansdowne strictly to escape the scorching summer heat of the Indian plains. They built all these roads, offices, and spectacular mountain routes like the Kalka-Shimla Railway, just to create comfortable administrative hubs for themselves. But today, those former colonial escapes have become absolutely massive domestic tourist destinations. That colonial architecture and infrastructure, it's now deeply embedded in India's own tourism heritage. All right, let's pivot to Section 3, transforming culture and language. We're talking cricket and English. I mean, nothing illustrates this historical irony quite like cricket. Right? A game brought over by a colonial power, initially limited by deep, deep racial and class barriers, was entirely co-opted. Indian communities completely embraced and adapted it, and today, well, it operates as a billion-dollar entertainment industry and is, without a doubt, a profoundly unifying national passion. And then, of course, there's the English language. Back in the 19th century, English was pushed for one main reason: to create a localized administrative workforce. The British just wanted people to help run their systems. But in an already rich, multilingual India, a place with incredibly deep scholarly traditions in Sanskrit, Persian, Tamil, Hindi, you name it, English unexpectedly morphed into this vital global bridge. Today, it stands as a powerhouse tool for higher education, science, diplomacy, and global business. Talk about a massive pivot. A tool of colonial administration became a key for global opportunity. Which brings us to Section 4. Reclaiming instruments of power, specifically the army, architecture, and the law. It's absolutely fascinating to see how the imposing instruments of power were fundamentally adapted. Think about the British Indian Army, originally used for imperial expansion and control, even fighting overseas in the world wars. But then, it changed its purpose entirely to serve a sovereign democratic nation. Architecture that was built simply for the symbolic display of imperial power, like the Gateway of India, is now national historical heritage, and those extensive law, police, and civil administration systems, designed to control a vast territory, they were inherited and completely reshaped to serve a constitutional republic. India didn't just preserve the system, they adapted the whole shebang to fit their own democratic framework. Now, let's move to Section 5, the true cost of empire. Because as we said, there was no simple generosity here. We really need to take a second to pause here and neutrally address the undeniable reality of the colonial era. Acknowledging that India repurposed all this infrastructure definitely does not mean the era was some sort of net positive. While economic historians will always debate the exact dollar figures, the clear consensus is that colonialism fundamentally disrupted traditional Indian industries, especially traditional textiles, for imperial benefit. The policies benefited Britain in major ways while imposing substantial, long-lasting costs on India. At its core, it was a system of political domination, so the very real economic and social toll of the empire that built this infrastructure remains completely undeniable. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6, a legacy reborn, the 1947 turning point. Following decades, literally generations of fierce political resistance and unimaginable sacrifice, British rule finally ended. Independence arrived on August 15, 1947, though it came alongside the immensely painful realities and human suffering of partition. India was left facing just unprecedented challenges, but the nation possessed the determination, the knowledge, and the inherited frameworks to reshape those systems for a democratic republic. They built something totally new from the ashes of empire. Ultimately, this is a story of profound reclamation. If you take away just one thing today, let it be this. The meaning of an institution fundamentally changes when the power behind it changes. An empire's railway becomes a nation's railway, moving families and students instead of extracted cotton. A colonial language turns into a global opportunity. An administrative empire gives way to a democratic state. And grand imperial monuments simply become historical reminders of the history that the country survived and overcame. So I want to leave you with this thought to ponder the next time you encounter remnants of the past, whether you travel by train, watch a cricket match, or just walk past a historic building. History is not just what happened. Why did it happen? Who benefited? And how do its consequences shape your world today? How are those historical forces of intent and outcome still shaping the world around you right now? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this gives you a powerful new lens to view the structures and systems we interact with every single day. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you on the next one.